Part two, so with all the changes that have been introduced in the community and to the platform and within the Open JDK community, obviously we need to adapt the JCP as an organization overall, and we do that through an effort called JCP.Next. So that's part of the work that I do with the Executive Committee of the JCP, as look at how we adapt our constitution. So the governing documents that we have that outline how the Java development works is done with the Executive Committee. So that means that I lead a project and the Executive Committee is my expert group, and they vote on it just like they would vote on any JSR going through the JCP. So that means that, you know, no one can randomly change the rules. It needs to go through the same process. One of the first changes that we made was to make everything transparent. So when the rules were first introduced, it didn't necessarily explicitly state that all the work of the development for the Java platform should be done in the open, which makes sense because most software wasn't developed in the open when the documents were first written. So we've explicitly made it the case that all of the downloads, so the early access builds that I talked to you about, the mailing list that I encouraged you to join, and the open issue trackers, those are all accessible to anyone in the community who wants to follow the work of the project as it progresses, but more importantly also open for that feedback. So while all along we always were soliciting and encouraging feedback from the developer community, it wasn't explicitly mandated. So now that's a requirement. Of course, in the last part of my talk we'll get into, you know, encouraging you and looking at ways that you actually can give feedback, but that's an important requirement, that there is transparency for the work as it's developed. The second thing that we also did was merge executive committees. So we have just one executive committee, but we used to have two. Now we just have one. So we used to have one executive committee for Java SE and Java EE, and one for Java ME. That's coalesced now, so just focused, like I said in the beginning, exclusively on Java SE, the platform, as well as the standalone JSRs or optional packages that are based on the Java SE platform. We're also going to be resizing the EC down from 25 members starting this year as well, so making it a little bit smaller. And then thirdly, and the last change that we've just recently focused on was increasing participation, so making it easier for developers to participate and join the JCP, and also enabling us to be able to move the technology forward faster, to be able to keep up with that 6-month platform release cadence. So starting with broadening the membership, that's one of the things that we did, was look at ways we can eliminate any barriers that exist. Some of those things were the one-size-fits-all membership, so a membership that was really designed to serve the needs of corporations, and then eliminating any fees, and also enabling all electronic signatures, and adding different ways to contribute to JSRs, not just as an expert group member, but also as a contributor, and also adding seats on our executive committee for the different types of memberships that we decided to offer. So what we did decide in the executive committee was that we would offer, rather than one size fits all, 3 different memberships. So we have an associate membership for individuals, so that's individuals who want to join and participate in the JCP work. They can do that. They can be listed as contributors on JSRs, and they don't need their employer's permission to do that. Secondly, we have a partner membership that's for Java user groups, like the San Diego Java user group. You're a partner member, and other nonprofit groups can fall into that category as well. And we currently have 2 Java user groups on the executive committee. We have the London Java community and So Java, which is based in Brazil. And then we continue to have what used to be called member is now full member. So full member can serve on expert groups, lead a JSR, and obviously serve on the executive committee. So 3 memberships instead of 1. So that focuses on the participation aspect, but then we focused on being able to move faster, the agility. So the life cycle that a JSR goes through was also based on the waterfall method and more accustomed to a release that would take several years to put forward versus 6 months. So we streamlined the JSR release cycle, making it more of an open development period, followed by that formal review by the community, as well as a vote by the executive committee. So we eliminated some of the votes by the executive committee because having multiple votes doesn't necessarily introduce anything useful, but an open development period where all members of the community can comment and provide feedback. Then an open review where people can have that opportunity to also provide their feedback, but also to raise any issues that may exist with the IP that's being incorporated into that release, followed by a vote of the executive committee ratifying it and enabling it to continue to final release. So it's a streamlined release cycle, which has been working really well. We put that out last year, and as I went through the last releases that we've had since 2017 in my first part of my talk, obviously we're being able to work together and put out those releases every 6 months. And the work of the executive committee is open also to the public. So if you're interested in finding out, how we came about some of these decisions, you can do that if you go to jcp.org and look for our EC meeting summaries. I try to keep those pretty concise, but I do provide all of the materials and slides that we went through. And we'll continue to have discussions moving forward. So that JCP.next effort is something that we do on an ongoing basis. It's a standing agenda item in terms of what's happening in the community and what changes might we need to make in order to adapt. Okay, so that means that the JCP is more open than it ever was before, and it leads me into the next part of my talk, which was how will you choose to participate in the evolution of the Java platform in the community. You can do so as an individual, like I just talked about. You can join the JCP as an individual. It doesn't cost anything. It's all electronic, right? And you don't need your employer's permission, right? So you can do it that way. It's open and available for you to do it that way. But what we found and what I've found working with developers all around the world, that it is more effective to do it as part of a team. So it not only provides better feedback to the project leads, but it's also a better experience for the developers because you're working together and helping each other and sharing your feedback and discussing it and distilling it down before you share it with the broader community. And what I've also found with the Java user groups that have participated in this effort is that they're achieving more, not just individually in terms of their personal development and career enhancement, but also the user group itself is achieving more. So increasing its prominence within the community, as well as building up that pipeline of leadership to achieve more and attract more sponsors, as well as more members. So this really leads into what we started to call the Adopt a JSR effort to help with leading adoption. We have 80 Java user groups participating currently in this. I don't have the San Diego Java user group listed up there yet. But you are now a member, so we're looking at taking that next step into getting more involved in some of these activities that I'll share with you. Some user groups have done, and maybe some of you can start to think about what you might want to do. So what we do with the Adopt a JSR with the Java user groups is it's a way to look at driving adoption of the technology overall. So helping to educate your local communities as well as people within your organization and your employers about what's coming next with Java, helping to evolve and move down that migration path, but also thinking about some of the new features and functionality that might be coming down the pipeline, as well as enabling you to be one of those, voices and people that people will come to for answers in the Java space. It's also a way to highlight your user group. So I like to usually highlight when I'm in a particular region or at a conference. I'll say like, oh yeah, put up the logo of the Java user group that I'm in. But you can see that we have Java user groups from really all over the world.
Which group is the Hulk?
Yeah, the whole group.
That's Peru. So I just went to Peru for the first time in July. I got my Peru Java user group T-shirt. Yeah. So you guys have a Duke personality for
We
San
have a
Diego
Duke on a surfboard in
Yeah.
the wave, so we may have to open that up to get a better image or maybe a better logo.
So yeah, we can have Duke on a surfboard here next time. So essentially, what the tips that I recommend for Java user groups. So basically, the traditional way Java user groups work is very much like how Paul has organized your group here, right? You meet once a month. Picking a regular date to meet is great. That's consistency for the members. It can be challenging for your speakers, which is why it took me several months to be able to get down here, because it has to be the third Tuesday of the month, right? So you can't have anything else going on that third Tuesday of the month, and you can't already have a speaker for that third Tuesday of the month, which is all very challenging for the leader, right? So organizing the sponsor, organizing the venue, organizing the speaker, sending out the invite, getting all the people here, right? So, and then having your monthly meetup, and then having the talk, the networking, the raffle at the end, the time for people to talk a little bit and then clean up and go home and do it again next month. That's pretty typical for how a Java user group works, but what we've seen start maybe 5 years ago or so is also incorporating more of this hands-on approach with Adopt a JSR, where you're doing more hands-on activities, which wouldn't replace your monthly meeting, but would be supplemental to, and a way to attract a broader variety of developers into your group, but also a way to build up your leadership pipeline, like you talked about when you're going to be at Code 1 next month, right? So oftentimes with these adoption efforts, as I walk through the 5 steps, it's good to have another leader step up and lead that charge, right? To have like maybe a monthly or a quarterly hands-on activity that's led by a different person, organized by that person exclusively. So they would walk through all these steps and organize the meetups and report back at your monthly Java user group traditional meeting. So this is something that most of the Java user groups that are working in Adopt a JSR have started to do, but still continue to have those monthly meetings for the consistency of your membership base. So if you want to get started with more of these hands-on type activities, what you would first do is identify that leader, and that person would maybe poll your community, right? So I've given you lots of ideas here tonight of things that you could get involved with. I didn't spend too much time going through some of the standalone JSRs that are going through the JCP, but there are a few. In addition to the Java platform, there are a few standalone JSRs which are being developed. I mentioned the visual recognition JSR in the machine learning space. There's also the desktop application API, units of measurement. There's also a money and currency 2.0 JSR coming out next, and then all the different things I talked about in the Java platform. So taking a poll and deciding, pick one thing. That's really the first step that I recommend to people. If you want to get involved in this effort, is pick the thing that either you personally are interested in, or maybe do like a doodle poll or an informal discussion amongst your membership. What are the things that we're interested in that apply to this program? That's the first step. So pick the thing, and then do a little bit of research. So on jcp.org, every JSR has a page that looks just like this, and that's where you find all the pertinent information. So you would have latest drafts, and then underneath it, under transparency, you have public communication. So that's where you get a link to the discussion forum that's happening for that JSR, and then also issue tracking. So that's where you find the public issue tracker. Those are probably the 2 most valuable resources. And then right underneath it, contact information for the spec lead. But really, if you're joining the public communications and mailing that on that list, you're going to reach the spec lead already. So really those 2 things are key, and obviously downloading the latest draft. Okay, so once you pick that thing and get familiar with some of the discussions that are happening, make sure that you communicate. So this is really, I would say, the most key thing that some of the user groups who started in the beginning didn't do, and I wish I could have pointed that out to them more clearly. So I always make a point of saying that It's a two-way street. All that information is available to you, so you're free to consume it, but make sure you're sharing back and communicating back your interest in that JSR, as well as maybe some of the work that you decide you might want to do. So for instance, say you said, oh, I think this JSR should have this new feature, and my Java user group is going to have a hack day, and we're going to build it, and we're going to deliver it to them, and then they're going to put it in there. Well, that's not necessarily how it's going to work, and that's not how it works in any open source project, really. So it's the same way. Before you would decide to dedicate a hack day to creating something, you would want to communicate with the spec lead on that discussion forum, with the project lead, and say, introduce yourself, this is who I am, demonstrate that you have some knowledge of the work that they're doing within that project, and offer your assistance, suggestions on what they might want, or your suggestion of what you would like to deliver. Really key to do that step before you would start to take action. Some of the things, though, that user groups have done in their hack days have been really helpful, and actually are things that spec leads are actually looking for and desiring in terms of that feedback. And again, going back to the communication, two-way street, right? So sharing ideas and feedback, really not that common for people who aren't actually participating on the expert group to provide feedback. And that's really important that we have that broad base of feedback. So sharing and commenting on the list and the issue tracker is really helpful. So in the early stages of something, that could be, suggestions for new things. Later on, maybe not so much. It'd be more like clarifications or things that are ambiguous or unclear. Reading early versions of the Java docs and the specifications, those can be lengthy. Anybody read a full specification ever? Referred to any part of one? Never referred to a specification? Okay. That's unusual. Okay. Well, we need feedback on the specifications in the Java docs.
What's a spec?
Spec is telling you how the technology works. So, right, that's what enables someone to go and build an independent implementation, is they just read the spec and then they create their own implementation. So obviously it needs to be complete and thorough. Very little feedback comes in on the specifications. And really the most popular thing and the most common thing is the next one, which is download and provide feedback on the early access reference implementation, right? So those are put out there every couple weeks, new versions as the project progresses. So you organize a hack day, download it, instruct everyone to bring an application that they want to test it against, and then you would have someone designated to collect that feedback and feed it back into the project lead, right? This is the build we use. These are some of the things that we experience. These are some of our suggestions, right? That feedback's really valuable, and that can be really gratifying for you as a group to personally work through those issues of downloading the latest release, but also being able to provide some concrete feedback and contribution. For new features, new functionality, sample applications are helpful. So for instance, like JSR 381, the visual recognition, that's a new thing, right? So having a sample application, if you're interested in that space and you want to write a sample application, since that one is just about finished, that would be helpful. Translation into other languages. I guess that could be Spanish here, if you don't know Spanish speakers. But particularly in places in like South America and in Brazil with Portuguese and Spanish and the rest of South America, they really like to have things in the local language. So a lot of the efforts in that region have been on educating and providing materials in the local language. But here, just talking about the technology. So for instance, like Project Valhalla, there's an individual in London who's going to organize a talk and a hack day around Valhalla because that's his particular interest. So educating his local community about what's happening. He'll do all the research and work in terms of what they're doing in that project and share that with his community. So that's something you can do. Also on social media, just sharing small tidbits about the build. So like, hey, I downloaded early access build. works great or needs work in this area. I don't know, I'm just saying, for instance. So sharing that with your followers, right? Like encouraging other people to do the same. And help with documentation. Everyone always wants help with documentation. Just a few ideas. This is not by any means a list that you're limited to, but a few suggestions of things that people have done. And then, so when you do those activities, share what your experience was. This is one of the issue trackers for one of the projects. But like I said, they might all look different, but you're going to find a link to it on the JSR page. And please share your feedback and comments and experience. On the discussion list is probably the best place. An issue tracker really would be, make sure before you try to start a new issue that you see if there's an existing one already that you could comment on. So that's, I guess, a best practice that I like to point out there. And then also, if you're part of a Java user group, mention that. So either on the discussion forum or in the issue tracker, because that does carry a little bit more influence in terms of you're sharing the feedback of your local community. It's not just your one-off experience. So sharing that there, that you're part of the user group. And have fun in the hack day. Like I said, it can be extra work, and I think that can be a barrier for Java user groups who want to get started, maybe who took that step of, like Paul did, of joining the JCP as a Java user group. But then, obviously you still want to keep your monthly meetings going. So I think that's a call for, someone in the room who has a little bit of extra time or wants to take on a prominent role in the community, really building up that leadership pipeline, right? To ensure the continuity of your community, but then also to bring in some of that fresher perspective, more of the hands-on approach, which is good for some people. And probably what I've seen is most often you would have a group, most typical Java user group that I go to has like 50 attendees at most meetings. Even if they have thousands of members, they would draw probably 50 attendees. That's pretty typical. But then in a hack day activity, maybe you would have 5 to 7. Even in the activity I've done in London, sometimes only 5 developers come for a hack day, and they really have been some of the most influential hack days that have been held by Java user groups. So from a small subset of developers, but again, more than one. So people coming together and helping each other. And obviously most people who are part of the global Java community have heard of the London Java community or of SoJava in Brazil, right? It's pretty well known if you're going to events, community events, that you would have heard of those user groups. And that's really as a result of getting directly involved with participating and contributing and giving their feedback to the Java platform leads as they're developing the technology that they're using and consuming on a daily basis. But not only that, is it a good thing to do, they've also found that they're having fun. So this is actually a picture from the Hacker Garden that I organized at Code One last year. I think you came by there at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Paul, yeah. Didn't happen to get in the picture, but it's a rotating basis. Someone took this picture. Someone at some point said, I want to get a picture. So that's the picture. These are by no means all the people that were participating throughout the conference, but a few folks there. So what you find is when you start getting involved in these activities too, you're gonna, make connections that you wouldn't otherwise, and you're also gonna start advancing some skill sets that are becoming increasingly in demand for developers. In terms of when I talk to hiring managers, often, what they see as setting a developer apart from others are really those communication, collaboration skills, being able to work with other people. It's no longer the case, the developer can just put their head down and deliver the code over the wall. That is not the way the world works anymore. So increasingly, half of the time in development work, you're spending time doing these types of things that you will strengthen through participating in the community through an open source project. Whether it's any of these projects I mentioned or different ones. So whether it's, participating in hack days to download the early access builds, which I just show you what that would look like if you go there to download the early access build of 13, or, joining the adoption group. So if you do decide to do a hack day, there is an adoption group in OpenJDK. So it would be like one of those groups I already talked to you about, Valhalla, Panama, Amber, all of those. There's also a group called Adoption. And in the adoption group, there's 2 different mailing lists that you can join. One is a discussion list, so that's where people share their feedback on the early access builds, or if they don't know where to go in OpenJDK, they're newcomers. But there's also a quality outreach group. So this is another idea of how you could get involved and do a hands-on activity. So the quality outreach group is part of the adoption group, and the idea with that group is that members of the community would help free and open source projects to stay up to date with the latest release. So what we found since we moved to a faster release cadence is the corporate backed projects have been able to keep up and move along fine. So within a day or 2 of the major platform release, all the IDEs are working fine. Those are commercially backed projects, and that they've been fine, but there are some projects that rely on open source contributors, people doing things in their side project time, and they need some additional help, new committers, new contributors, and so they've created this quality outreach group. It's a matrix of about 100 different projects who are people who are participating in this initiative. And what that means is if you go to the quality outreach group, you'll find a matrix of those projects, as well as contact information of how you can reach out to that project, and then what's their status. So in terms of, are they green on 11, 12, 13, even 14, they're testing, well, I don't know if they started testing for 14 yet, but early access builds for 14 are already out. And a couple of the different project leads that I put here, like I said, there's over 100, are Eclipse Collections and Apache Maven. So they've found some great success in engaging with people in Java user groups and in hack days like I talked about. So people who have decided that they're a fan of one of these projects and they want to make sure that they're keeping up to date with the newest release, and they're volunteering their time to help. So that's also something that you can do as a Java user group or as an individual. Pick a project that you want to get involved in and reach out to the project lead and indicate your interest. And that's really why they are there in the program, is they want help from the community in keeping up with the faster release cadence. Okay. If you want to join the JCP, you can do that by going to jcp.org. You can also follow news from the JCP on Twitter. That's my social platform of choice, I guess you could say, where you get the latest updates on the JCP. I manage a JCP_org handle, as well as my personal Twitter account, which is HeatherVC. I do an occasional blog post and a very occasional Facebook post. Which I don't even bother with LinkedIn. You were sharing in the beginning that you sometimes do. I really just find I reach more people just on Twitter. So that's really the best place to reach out to me. I will be at Oracle Code 1 next month. A great thing about this event, I know only 1 or 2 of you are going, but one thing you can keep in mind for the future is most of these talks are recorded, so you can listen to them after the fact, either together or on your own. It's obviously very close, so I encourage you to think about maybe submitting a talk for next year. We have lots of panels, so yeah, probably Paul can help you coordinate that, but even up until like a few weeks ago, I was helping people get onto panels. So even though it's not called Java 1 anymore, Java is still a big focus of the event. It's really just expanded to embrace other languages as well, which I really see as a trend. Even if you have traditionally only done Java, you're probably going to find that you're going to be tasked with having to use and learn other tools and technologies as well. So it's a good opportunity to get to some exposure to those other languages, and also to engage with the global community. I do like to go to all different developer events around the world, but this really is the one where you can get contacts with all different types of people from every region of the world. So I really like to take advantage of that event. Thanks for coming to my talk today. That concludes my formal presentation and my visit to San Diego, but I hope that you will take the action item to follow up and organize some type of hands-on activity, and I would love to come and participate in your hack day when you organize it. in the coming year.
Ah.
Then I can come to San Diego more often.
Do we have any quick questions for Heather?
Did the JCP, it used to cover EE as well, right?
Yes, so Java EE was migrated to the Eclipse Foundation. So it's, if you're interested in following what was formerly known as Java EE, you can do that in the Jakarta EE project at the Eclipse Foundation.
So they're running their whole other community process or whatever for that at all, right?
Anything that is building off of what was Java EE will be managed in the Eclipse Foundation.
All right.
Okay, any other questions? Okay,
Okay.
thanks again, Heather.